Yeah, I'm excited about that. We'll have to fast click in the other one. All right, did you guys guys?
We're recording, so we're good to go whenever. I'll just see if everybody else is good.
They're all like either.
All right. We've got a nice size group here. The first one was a bit crazy, so I appreciate you being patient and letting us get to work through this. Just quickly about me, I'm Garth, and if you have any questions, feel free to hit me up on Twitter. If everything doesn't work or you need any help with anything afterwards, feel free to. If it works here and then you go home and it doesn't work there, or at work, let me know and we can fix it. I've been at Adobe since 2011. I've been on the PhoneGap team for a little over a year, close to 2 years. And before that, I was doing design stuff on other teams. So, in here, has anyone built a PhoneGap app before? Raise your hands. Yeah? Okay. Do you have Node installed on your machine? Raise your hands. No? Okay. Good? Yeah? Okay. We'll use some of that. That'll be helpful, but it's not required yet. We'll try our best to get through that stuff. So our main goal for the workshop is I just want to get the PhoneGap Desktop App installed on your machine. I want to get the Developer App installed on a device, and I want to be able to preview just our Hello World app in there. So that's my main goal. If you only get that far, that's okay. But if we get past that, and I suspect we will, especially with a group this small, we've got some extra goals that we're going to try and hit. We're going to use the command line tool because there's some benefits to it, which means we're going to have Node and Git installed if you don't already. And then we're going to use Weinre for debugging the app, which is, it's really nice when you get it to work. And we're going to use some plugins. We're going to use the Vibrate plugin. But if we have more time, we'll play with more plugins. Okay, so what are hybrid apps? To understand what hybrid apps are, we need to understand the difference between native and web. So native applications are what we think of when we buy something from the App Store. It's a native application. It's usually compiled for that platform. The advantages of it, it's optimized for that platform. So it's usually a bit more performant. You also get a UI UX toolkit available through the SDK, depending on where you're building it. So your app usually has a nice look and feel that fits with the rest of the system. Disadvantages, they're platform specific. So if you spend all your time building an iOS app, you can't port that app easily over to Android or to Windows Phone. All the code that you wrote is pretty much stuck on iOS. And that's one of the main reasons why people would use something like a web application. In this case, we're talking about browser-based web applications. So the advantages here, you can use web tools, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to build an application. It works on multiple platforms if you build it correctly. The disadvantages, though, oftentimes performance. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript aren't quite as performant as native stuff, but the performance really is only an issue if you're trying to do stuff that takes a lot of heavy lifting or if you're doing something wrong. Depending on the app, most people won't have any problem with web performance. And then there's limited system access through the browser. There's certain aspects of the phone that you're not able to get access to just through the browser API. And also, oftentimes web applications require internet connection. Now, you can make offline applications, but the user experience isn't amazing on those. Sometimes the users aren't completely sure what is offline or what's online. So a hybrid application, and this is what we're going to play around with today. It has the benefits of the native applications. We get access to the system and the hardware. You can do things like getting access to the contacts or camera or compass. You can also sell it in the App Store, which a lot of people prefer that installation process and that experience for getting things on their phone. But we have the benefits of a web application. It has HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, so you don't have to learn Objective-C or Java to be able to make an app. So PhoneGap helps us do this. So PhoneGap is an open source framework for building these hybrid apps. And PhoneGap right now is currently supporting iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. There are some community contributions to help on other platforms, but PhoneGap itself is just on those platforms, supported by Adobe. So PhoneGap consists of, as far as what we're going to be using, a PhoneGap app consists of it's a native application that contains a web view, which is the presentation layer. So it's showing us just a browser, but it has zero Chrome. So it's a full screen web view. And then it has a JavaScript API that provides additional functionality that the browser doesn't have. So it gives us access to things that the browser wouldn't otherwise. And it also is extensible, so we can make plugins for it. And we're going to use one plugin. There's a ton of community contributed plugins, some that Adobe and PhoneGap themselves have contributed, and some that are just coming from the community. Any questions about what a PhoneGap application is?
What's the difference between PhoneGap and Cordova?
Okay, what is Cordova? Excellent question.
Great job.
I'll pay you later. Okay, so I was thinking I should really make a drawing, an illustration of this. Cordova really is the engine that powers PhoneGap. Cordova is in PhoneGap. And we've got the commitment on the PhoneGap team to not take PhoneGap in a different direction from Cordova. In fact, the original history of Cordova, the way that it works out, is PhoneGap. It started as PhoneGap, and then when Adobe acquired PhoneGap, the open source portion of PhoneGap was contributed to Apache, so it's now Apache Cordova. And PhoneGap itself mainly is kept for the name and for branding and for licensing purposes for Adobe. So they're not going in two different directions. The main team that works on PhoneGap also works on Cordova. All of the tools that we have, we're going to be using the command line tool. You can actually use the Cordova command line tool if you prefer it, instead of the PhoneGap command line tool. So they shouldn't be too different in your mind. Now, if you're doing AEM and you want to do AEM apps, mobile apps for AEM, PhoneGap's tightly integrated in with that. So,
yeah, you can still build on the command line using either the Cordova or PhoneGap tools, but if you're going to use our cloud build service that AEM integrates with, then you're going to use PhoneGap.
but would you even be able to tell the difference though?
Nope.
Yeah.
You can think of Cordova and PhoneGap as synonyms.
One is 100% open source, and the other one is using that 100% open source project.
Yes.
So, yeah. Any other questions on what is a PhoneGap app or what is Cordova? If all you get out of it is that, this is the #1 question that we get all the time. Yeah, so we understand there is some confusion there, and we're trying to clarify, but it is what it is. Okay, so yeah, this is just that commitment. All Apache Cordova projects will work with PhoneGap and vice versa. So the PhoneGap framework. The PhoneGap framework, in this context, it's got 5 tools, and we're going to be talking about 3 of them today. I'll mention the build one, but we're not going to use it. We're going to be mainly using the desktop app and the developer app just to get things working. I want you to be able to see and feel what it's like to have an app on your phone that you deployed. But then we're also going to use the command line tool because it gives us some more flexibility. There's some additional functionality that we can do with the command line tool. That's the command line tool. Looks something like that. Looks like command line. All right, and there's the desktop app. In fact, no, we'll download it here in a second. That shouldn't be a problem. And then the developer app. You can go ahead and download this on your device if you haven't already. If you have a mobile device, Android, Windows Phone, or iOS, just go to the App Store and search for PhoneGap Developer. It'll work on tablets and phones. But I would recommend going ahead and installing that because we're going to use it here in a second. And then PhoneGap Build. PhoneGap Build was a service. It is a service that allows you to. I mainly use it through GitHub, but you deploy your code onto GitHub, and then it takes it and wraps it and bundles it and spits out your App Store ready apps or test ready apps if you want to test them on different devices. So it is a cloud-based service for building your applications. It's really nice when you're working with a team to be able to have something like this Otherwise, you have to have one person responsible for building all the builds. This kind of just takes some of that load off of a single person and makes it available to everybody. And it's fantastic for testing as well. It gives you a nice QR code that you scan and you can install the apps pretty easily. Okay, any questions about what we've talked about so far? Okay, I've got a couple of PhoneGap team members in here that if you run into any problems, you raise your hand as we're going through this and we'll make sure to stop and get you some help. We are building on it, so if you get stuck in one place, ask for help, otherwise you'll get lost as we get further down the road. It'll just get worse. Okay, so let's go ahead and download and install the PhoneGap Desktop App. If you go to docs.phonegap.com, oh, I'm going to pull off my laptop there. If you go to docs.phonegap.com and click on step 1, install PhoneGap, you'll see the Desktop App tab is selected, and just go down and pick your platform and install it. There are step-by-step instructions here for how to install it, but it's pretty straightforward. Yeah?
What's the latest version of the PhoneGap app?
The desktop app, the latest version is
0.2.1.
0.2.1. Where do you find that in the app itself?
In the app, there should be an About menu. So go to the question mark, hit About.
0.2.1. Okay. So if you want to see what version you have, if you already have it installed. Okay. Any problems with installing the developer app, or the desktop app? Sorry. Okay. Again, you're going to want to have the developer app on your mobile device. So there's also instructions on that, but it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty much go to your app store and you can search for it, or you can click on these links through the docs. Once you install it, you can open it up and it looks like that. Okay? Everyone good so far? All right, let's go to the PhoneGap the PhoneGap Desktop App. And I'm going to delete this app here. And we're going to create a new app. So click on the plus sign. We're going to create new PhoneGap project. And our local path, let's go to the desktop. And I already have mine here, but just click on app sample. Or sorry, I made a folder on the desktop so I could find it later. And I'm going to delete mine real quick now that I'm discussing this. Okay, so, and then name your app, go ahead and name it app sample. I camel cased it. You can do whatever you want, but yeah, just so you remember what it is later. Okay, so as soon as you create it, it should automatically start running the server. So what it's doing is it's got a hello world type of app, just very basic app. And we'll go and dig into the code so you can see what it's doing. But then it's serving it on this IP address with this port. You're going to want to make sure that both your phone and your computer are on the same Wi-Fi. And if you're an Adobe employee, the corporate Wi-Fi won't work. So we have a special Wi-Fi just for today. But then you should be able to open up your PhoneGap Developer App on your phone. And you want to type in that URL and IP address exactly. And if you do, when you connect it, it should look like this, and it'll say device is ready. So if you have this working, go ahead and show me your phone. If you don't, raise your hand and we'll come fix it for you. We'll make it work. Okay, awesome. And if you don't have, if you just want to connect to mine, you can connect to mine as well. I mean, you don't get the full experience. Okay, so now that we've got this running, I want to show you what it actually created. So if I go into the, there you go. If I go into the app sample, actually I've got a slide for this, it'll make it easier. If I go into that app sample directory, there are a number of directories there. Most of them are actually empty right now. Hooks, it's for putting hooks that are similar to like Git hooks, if you've ever played around with those. They're to add functionality to your build process without having to mess around with the tool too much. Platforms, we're not actually going to be building to platforms in this workshop. We're just going to be testing it through the developer app on the phone. So we're not building an APK or what's the iOS, whatever the iOS one is. IPA. I forget that. So plugins, we don't have any in there yet, but we're going to install the Vibrate plugin here in a little bit. The www folder is actually where we put our HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So that's what we're viewing right now, and we'll go dive into that code just a little bit. .Cordova, it's just a configuration directory that we're not using. And then the config.xml is actually pretty useful stuff. We won't dive into it too much here. What I do want to point out is if I go to...
Can you crank that font up?
Yeah. I go to my folder, or was it app sample, right? Go ahead and open it. That's not what I want. There you go. So if I go into this file, if I go into the config.xml, you'll see here there's some permissions and some preferences. What I actually want to point out is the plugins. So all of these plugins that we have here will work with the PhoneGap Desktop and PhoneGap Developer App workflow that we're using. If you want any plugins outside of this, you're going to have to do a different build process because we can't just load plugins into the operating system or into an iOS app like that. But there are some really great plugins in there, and you'll find that a lot of what you're doing is easy to test using this workflow if you can get by with just these plugins. The one that we're going to be using is right here, the vibration one. But you've got ones for file and file transfer, contacts, to access the contacts on that phone. I thought there was a geolocation one in there.
Yeah, that's right.
Am I missing it?
File transfer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, geolocation, globalization, in-app browser. There's some good stuff in there. So if we have time, we'll play with more than one. And the other thing I wanted to show you was what the actual stuff that's getting served up looks like. We've got an index.html file, and here it's got a div that says in an H1 tag PhoneGap, and then it tells us device ready, and it says connecting device and device is ready. Those classes are actually switched out depending on whether the device is ready or not. So looking at the JavaScript, we've got something listening for when the device is ready and making that change. So it's hiding one and showing the other. And I think there is some CSS. It's pretty minor stuff. We don't have a lot going on in this application. I think we've got more legal documentation in this app than code. Okay, any questions about this so far? So if you wanted to, if you've got it running, you can go into this HTML file. Where did I put my HTML file? And I can change this from PhoneGap to say Garth Gap. I'm rebranding. And if my phone is connected, it actually will refresh automatically and it'll change the text on there. If it's not refreshing, you can do a 4-finger tap. You'll probably forget this, but 4 fingers will refresh. 3 fingers will actually exit out of that app back to that home screen. And I say that you'll forget it. The reason that we did it, it's not intuitive and it's not designed to be. But if you were building an app that needed 2-finger touch support, we can't hijack that from you or else you wouldn't be able to test that. So we went with something that was intentionally obscure. Hopefully it's not something you need to use in your app. Otherwise it makes it a little bit tough to test. Okay, so we've got our PhoneGap Desktop App, and we've got our Developer App working correctly. So that was our main goal, and we hit it pretty quick. Yeah, it's a lot easier with a group this small.
Well, you guys are awfully quiet. Yeah. Surprisingly quiet.
Yeah, too quiet. All right, we're gonna do the command line tool now. So let's go ahead. You need to have Git installed on your machine. To install Git, if you're on a Windows machine, I would probably recommend doing the minimal installation process, just going to the Git source itself and downloading the installer there. Otherwise, on a Mac, there's a nice workflow that GitHub has documented on how to do. You might have Git pre-installed already on your machine, even if you didn't do it yourself, but we'll have to double check versions, make sure that it's recent enough. And then, if you can get Git installed, the next step would be installing Node. And again, on a lot of Macs, you have Node pre-installed, but we need a version higher than 0.10. So I'll show you how to check that version and make sure that you're okay. Okay, so yeah, if you already have something installed or you want to double check if it's installed, we type in git -- version, and that'll give you your Git version. If you do node -- version, that'll give us our Node version. And we also need to check npm. npm is now bundled with Node.js. So if you install it, you most likely have npm if you have Node installed. But you need to make sure that you have npm, I think, higher than 2.0.0. I think is the minimum. And Node has to be higher than 0.10.0. But know that if you do have version 5, which is kind of still in the experimental stage, that version 5 will give you a lot of warnings about applications. So we'll just ignore those. It seems to work. Everyone have that installed? Everyone okay with Node and Git?
Is Git 2.3 okay?
You should be fine with, you've got 2.3 on yours?
I think you're fine.
You should be fine with that. I don't know what the minimum is for this, but I think that should be fine. Okay, so if you already have these installed, we're going to go ahead and install the PhoneGap command line tool, and we do that via npm. Do npm space install -g space PhoneGap. Depending on how your npm and your node is set up, you might have to do that with sudo. Hopefully you don't have to. And even though I have it installed, it takes forever to install. I don't know why it can't do smart checking.
Yeah.
You're an idiot. You've already installed this today 3 times. If you're running into problems with Node, JIP, is it pronounced JIP? JIP? I don't know. JIP? Yeah. If you're running into problems with that, you might need the command line tools installed if you don't have those already from Xcode. So now that we have the PhoneGap command line tools installed, I'm going to back out of this one, out of this folder. So go into a folder, we're going to create a new app. Not that our last one was bad, but here, let me delete the new app that I'm about to create. We're going to create a new one so you know what that experience is like. It's PhoneGap space create, and I'm going to name this one my app, camel case. And it's pretty quick. If I do an ls on that, everything's pretty much the same as what we did with the desktop app. If I go into that directory, I can type in PhoneGap serve, which serves the same functionality that we had before. So at this point, if you're getting this to work and it's giving you a port, you should be able to jump on that port using your developer app. And now we've done the same thing both ways. Once via developer app, once via the desktop app, and once via the command line tool. Notice that once I connect, it starts giving me stuff. It starts giving me some nice output as far as what's happening. It's even doing a console log here. If I look at the JavaScript code, we're spitting out a log for when the device is ready. And then it'll continually auto-reload. So if I make changes in my source code, it'll reload the app for me, which is really nice.
Did you get that going?
I typed in, it's just going to keep scrolling up off the screen.
PhoneGap serve.
PhoneGap space serve. Yeah, that's heartbreaking. For phones.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was having trouble
With Node?
yeah,
Okay.
with this error.
Let's hit the identify. Go ahead and type the node dash dash space dash dash version.
Oh.
Space identifier. Okay, I don't think it's got node installed. Did you install it?
And
Yeah, I downloaded this.
the alternative.
Okay. It should have.
It's trying to run the PhoneGap command from inside the node REPL. So you need to open a command line, like a Windows command line. All apps. So to run, yeah.
This one's pretty important. So if you're following along, make sure that we get you to this point. It should be able to serve and preview.
Okay, cool. Exit it.
PhoneGap create.
Or no.
Where's the
I meant
image
like-
come from?
The image comes from.
Okay, so now if you go to
So if I go into my www, well, I can preview it here.
if you
If I
space
my image files right there.
And basically when you opened up.
What's pulling around the page?
I believe that's in the CSS.
PhoneGap space
And then try to.
Yeah. So it's a background
Okay,
image.
so did you install PhoneGap yet?
It means it.
We could just as easily do an image tag, but it would work the same way.
He installed it inside the do it.
I downloaded the file.
Yeah.
On the website.
Perfect. Okay, so you have the PhoneGap desktop app. So
Okay, so anything that we're doing right now, I'm pretty much just following
Yeah.
the walkthrough that's on the docs. So we went through, we installed PhoneGap, we did it both with the desktop and with the command line tool. We've installed the mobile app, we've created our first app, we've run it, and now we're at the going further point. So when you get back to your office and you want to figure out what you did, it's all right here.
Okay. So that just means.
Okay. Now we're going to depart just a little bit. Go ahead and go to this URL. I was making people type this out before the code changes that we're going to do, but just for safety, we're going to copy and paste. So if something goes wrong, we had 3 people with typos that we could not find until the very end. So let's just copy and paste. Go to this URL. You can type it out the long way if you want to, but yeah, Bitly is a little bit easier to type out. Bitly/1 capital W Q lowercase b J uppercase X uppercase R. Okay, so we're going to go down to the plugin part. Use a plugin. And here, the first thing we need to do is we actually need to install the vibration plugin. So if you notice, there's a link here. I'm going to open that up in a new tab. You don't have to open this up. I'll show you what command we're going to grab. But we are going to, in our project, we're going to type in PhoneGap plugin add Cordova plugin vibration. So this will use, it actually uses npm to download and install that plugin. There's the command, again, if you need it. So now that we have that installed, we can actually use the plugin in our code.
Is that URL case sensitive?
Oh, this bit.ly one?
Yeah.
Yeah, annoyingly enough it is. Here, I will underline the uppercase letters. Capital W, Q, capital X, R. Am I missing something?
She's having her phone to the PhoneGap.
Trying to follow.
She an Adobe employee? Is she an Adobe employee?
Yes.
Okay, she has to go into settings and turn off the auto join.
Oh,
Because it's
because
auto
it keeps
joining to core
keeps
for
going
guys.
core. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So now that you're
So
serving
now
a
what
new
we'll
app,
copy and paste. So you have to disable auto and then make
and so the IP address that we have here, does it match? Okay, perfect. So if you connect, and we should see.
Okay, I'm going to take this down, make sure everyone saw it first though. Okay, so we have the plugin. Now we need to actually utilize it. So that's why I gave you that URL. From that URL that I gave you, if you go down to the use a plugin, there's a code snippet right here. Right now, on lines 31 through 37, it says app.received event device ready. Right underneath that, we're going to insert this little block of code. So you can type it out if you want to, and I'll put it up on the screen in big letters if you want to type it. But just in case something goes wrong, we've got it ready to copy and paste. And it's going to copy and paste it with the line numbers. I apologize. Okay. So I'll give you a quick run through of what we're doing here so you understand. We don't have jQuery, or we're not using Sizzle or any DOM querying library right now. We can always include it if we wanted to, but for simplicity's sake, all I'm doing is getting the element by the ID that is device ready. If I go and look at my HTML file, device ready is just this ID right here. It'll be the little blinking text inside that green block. So I'm getting that element by ID, and I'm adding an event listener. I'm adding a click event listener. And when it clicks, what I want it to do is I want navigator.vibrate. And this 300, this is actually the duration of the vibration. Sadly, iOS doesn't care what we want for the duration. It's going to do whatever it wants. It has a set vibration time. But if you're using Android or Windows Phone, you can set the time. In fact, you can actually pass through an array of numbers to set a pattern if you wanted to. And I'm doing a console log on here. It actually was going to return a null, but that's fine. I actually just want to show it so that you can see it in the console. And it's a good way for debugging as well. So once you've made those code changes, you can do PhoneGap serve in that directory. I'm going to go back to that.
Yeah, great. Because we had to install some stuff, so we got a little behind. Where Where is which URL do you go to copy it?
So you go to that one,
Everyone,
and then go to the exercises. There's one called plugins, using plugins. You can type it out too. You don't have to.
You don't have firewall.
So yeah, so this is what we already have in those lines. Scroll down a little bit. Copy, paste. Just replace. PM. Connect. You will. But give it a try. Just override. You have it's ready.
Is yours working?
And you take out the numbers.
What's interesting about this is even though that 300 is not required in there for iOS because it's going to do whatever it wants, it still wants a number. If you don't put in any number, it won't work. I don't know exactly why. Another interesting thing here is if you do it and if you tap it, you'll notice that there's actually a delay between your tap and the actual vibration. That's because we're doing an on-click. If you change the click to touch start, it'll actually eliminate that.
Visual.
Alright. So a JavaScript call goes across the bridge to the native side and calls the native. So you're caught up now. Let me know if you need anything else.
I think it's very scripted. Yeah, it just goes in. Now he's and then save. And then he's adding a plugin to it.
Okay, so everyone, if you're not caught up, let us know. It still has its limitations on the vibration. If you try and do too many, it won't. It'll just ignore the ones in between.
You can set a vibration pattern too.
Not on iOS. On Android, you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what the limitations on the smallest and largest amounts are.
Yeah, but.
On Android, the smallest amount is 0, actually. Which is funny when you're setting a pattern because you're basically telling it
Not do
either
anything.
not to vibrate or to vibrate for 0 milliseconds, which
Either way.
affects Android.
Okay, the last part is probably the most useful part for actually doing PhoneGap development, because we're going to talk about how to debug your apps, which you're going to need to do all the time. Your JavaScript and HTML will be perfect, and for some reason it still won't work. So debugging is very helpful. To get debugging to work, though, we got to make sure that we're serving and viewing it on your app. We're good on time, right? Like
We're really good on
we're
time.
really good on
Yeah,
time.
we've got
You guys
50
are
minutes.
cruising through this. If you want to mess around while we're waiting, what I would recommend doing is going into your config.xml, picking another plugin.
Yeah.
So, device motion. Let's take a look at what that looks like. If you just Google the full name, it'll take you to it. And the notes are pretty good. So it provides access to the device's accelerometer. It'll give you the X, Y, and Z. And you can even just throw this in here. You can play around with it. This is only going to give it to it once. And it's giving it an empty object. If you were debugging it in such a way that you could actually test, we'll do that better when we show the debugging. I'm trying to think what the parameters of that object is, or what the values of those objects are. Is it just X, Y, and Z?
No, there's the X, Y, Z. There's gravity. Isn't there gravity on that one as well?
Acceleration.x. So we can do navigator.accelerometer.get current acceleration. Yeah, anyway, this is a little bit outside the scope. I just don't want you to get bored.
Yeah. So it was, good. I wasn't reading. So it's actually. So the code says when the device is ready,
There you go, that works.
so you change that green code.
Oh, if this works, when I save it, there you go. I'm able to get my accelerometer X, Y, and Z. So pick a. I really want you to get it as experiments, play around. So pick another plugin from our config list.
Yeah.
So what you could do is
Go and Google it. Find the documentation. I successfully crashed it. When you know you're doing it right. You can only do it 2 times. And then the 3rd time it starts the app over again. Cool. I don't know what I'm doing wrong there. Something obvious in my code, I'm sure.
No, it's probably just.
I'll blame you.
It's not your blame.
Yeah, I think it's this demo card.
Yeah.
Point is,
Yeah.
the nice part is now you can actually start to write code and it should.
Those are my dogs. My wife is texting me pictures of my dog
It should.
in the middle of my session.
So I say, yes, if you open
Other than my session, what have been your guys' favorite sessions so far today?
here.
Other than my session.
Just this one, honestly.
The other ones have been on
Intermediate.
the intermediate.
I was supposed to say.
Molly does a good job.
I really have no idea what I'm doing.
Okay.
So this is kind of like the first
Oh, you saw it?
session or workshop that I do.
And ideally, we really wanted, that's why we did it first thing in the day. We wanted people to be able to have access to it before anything else. But probably should have prepared it in the larger room or something.
Yeah, well, we were hoping that not as many people needed it and we could have more intimate settings, so it's very difficult to debug when you get up to like 40 and 50 people in the room.
That is true. We could have done 2 sessions at the same time, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's why
You're making people do double prep
all
work.
the people who are like sitting here on the wall, like, there's gonna be another session, come to that one, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Bluetooth was pretty cool.
Now, what'd you get it to do?
Just one of those little Bluetooth sensors.
Oh, the Bluetooth session. I thought you were talking about a Bluetooth plugin. I'm like,
Oh,
pretty
no,
sure
no.
there's not a Bluetooth plugin that we can access.
They got one.
Yeah.
There is one, but not that we can do through the
Actually,
developer app.
yes, you can now.
Yeah.
So part of the thing that's having done here to do the workshop is we put the Bluetooth plugin into the PhoneGap Developer App so we can run the workshop.
It's just hidden in there?
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. So what did you guys end up building with it? Do you have Arduino boards? Or?
Well, no, they have this little Bluetooth thing, and it has like a temperature sensor on it and some LED lights, so you can interact with that. Also, it's like a little buzz you can interact with.
Did you buy them or did you 3D print them?
No, you purchased these. They're
Okay.
Western or Instrument, was it Texas Instrument? Yeah, you can buy them, but get a bunch.
That's cool.
Yeah.
You can go home and set up a weather station.
Yeah, well, you can interact with Arduino or Raspberry Pi with them.
I got a cool idea for a project that my wife told me not to do. That's about right for most of my cool ideas. All right, we're gonna move ahead, and if we need to circle back around, we will. But I want to show you how to set up Weinre. So we need to install Weinre, and you don't have to use sudo, but you can. But it's npm. You might have to use sudo. So try it without it and then do it again. But it's npm. We're going to do the same thing. npm install -g. That means we're installing it globally on the machine. It becomes a command line tool that we can have access to. And we're installing Weinre. W-E-I-N-R-E. Weinre is not owned by the PhoneGap team. Is that correct? All right. It's owned by
Patrick Mueller,
Okay.
who was formerly of IBM and is now at NodeSource, is the maintainer of that package.
So it's a super helpful project, but we didn't build it.
We kind of did because Pat was part of the Cordova team at the time that he built it.
Okay. Cordova built it.
Yeah.
How's that Cordova built? So what we need to do is what we're going to be doing is we're going to be serving our PhoneGap app on one port, and then we're going to be serving the Weinre dev tools on another port. And I'll show you how that works. But first, let's go ahead and start serving our PhoneGap app again. PhoneGap serve. And then you're going to want to open up another terminal or another whatever. Mine has tabs, so I'm going to open up a new tab. And go to the same directory. So technically you shouldn't have to. Desktop, what do I call mine? PhoneGap Day. And we're using my app right now, right? Okay. Oh yeah, I was stepping on it. Okay, so you're going to want to grab your port, or sorry, your IP address, not the port. So you're going to want to, after you do PhoneGap serve, copy your IP address. And then in your other tab, you're going to type in Weinre bound host. And it's camel cased. Come on. There we go. So it's Weinre -- bound uppercase host, and then your IP address. So now you can see here that it has started another server on a different port. So if I copy this URL here, this IP import, and I open it up in a browser, Weinre stands for Web Inspector Remote. I don't know. It's kind of a lame name to me.
Actually, it was all a joke because when Pat announced it to everyone, the subject title was "Check out my meter," but that's what it looked like, but it's Weinre, and I just assumed that Pat had gotten hacked that day. So
Probably is
Can you go
true.
back to that bind command?
Yep. Weinre -- bound host, and you got to use your IP address. You can use mine, but then you're just going to be debugging my application, which isn't as useful. why I can't copy and paste. I couldn't include this next part in a thing to copy and paste because it's based on what your IP address is. So we can't inspect it yet. It says it down here. We've got to include a target script into our HTML. So when you're on this page, you copy the script tag and you paste it in your HTML file. And I like to put it underneath my Cordova.js. It doesn't really matter. Wherever you put your script tags, you put that. And notice it's got the same URL and port. We got Andre taking pictures. It's going to be good. So once that's in there, and if your app reloads, if it does it correctly, when you, I'm going to go back and show you what I did there. It shows here the debug client user interface. Like, click on that, it gives me a target, and you should have a link there if it's connecting correctly. If it's not, let us know, and we will come and fix it. This one's important. So you click on that, turns green, which means we are currently debugging that target. And I can see here, it's showing me the DOM for this app, and I can actually highlight and hover over different areas, and it's highlighting those on my phone. I can come in here and I can change this to Garth Gap again, and it updates it here. Now that didn't save it to a file, it's just through the developer tools. So if you're familiar with the Chrome developer tools, you'll feel comfortable with Weinre. I've got all of my styles that I can go through and mess with, and I've even got the console as well. So yeah, I got rid of my accelerometer somehow. Instead of alerting this, I can just console log the acceleration and see if this works. Nope, I'm doing something wrong. I broke my accelerometer somehow, which is not surprising to me, because I've been doing some crazy stuff a little bit. But still, I'm still, yeah, Weinre's super awesome. I'm hoping that we can in the future make it a little bit easier to use it. But even still, if you get Weinre connected up, it makes it a lot faster to figure out what's going wrong with your applications. Otherwise, before we had Weinre, or when it's not working, you have to kind of load it in the browser and kind of guess at what it's doing in your mobile browser. Or load it in the mobile browser and debug it using Chrome DevTools or Safari DevTools, which it's just not as nice. Okay, you guys got through this stuff much quicker than the morning group, obviously because you're a lot smarter. If you have any problems at all, though, let us know. We're pretty much, that's done with my material. I would recommend continuing to play with it if you've got the time right now. Grab another plugin, just kind of go with it. Okay. Okay.
Is there a way to interact with the styling there?
Yeah.
I'll show you on your app what it's doing.
Yeah, it does it live.
Yeah.
So
change the background color to red there. You've got Weinre open, and you should see that immediately. Or
On the
phone
app class.
on body. Oh no, you're right. On is it app which? Oh, I've got a background image on there as well.
Yeah, you mentioned it red. There's background image, so just comment in background image. There should be a little checkbox in it. Just see a little checkbox or a checkbox.
Where's the documentation for these sessions?
So it's all on docs. Docs.phonegap.com.
Oh, I mean for the conference.
The documentation, like, where's the conference website?
Yeah.
The conference website's pgday.phonegap.com.
Oh, okay.
So we're currently in the Lehigh one, and we've got tomorrow's schedule here. Though you've got tomorrow's schedule on your badge as well. The only difference between this and that is this tells you who's actually speaking.
Cool.
We ran out of space.
Other interesting things like.
Are the presentations going to be posted somewhere?
We're recording them, and we always try and post the videos. There you go, I got mine ready.
So if you follow the PhoneGap user on YouTube, that's where eventually everything will get posted to.
Okay.
And you can go there and see presentations from PhoneGap days past.
So they're quite interesting, some of them.
I recommend a certain vintage from 2011.
Some of them probably could have been edited for content
Yeah.
or language.
SFW, sure.
Some of them are NSFW.
Definitely SFW.
The risk you take when you just say, hey, speak about whatever you want. Good luck.
I'm gonna shut down the recording.
Go ahead.
But people have like
You have time and I'm here for you.